Nairobi, Kenya, November 20th, 1974. Lufthansa Flight 540, a Boeing 747, begins its takeoff. 157 people on board. Seconds later, the unthinkable happens. The jet struggles to climb, stalls and crashes just beyond the runway, bursting into flames. 59 lives lost. The first fatal crash of a Boeing 747. A tragedy caused not by engines or weather, but by one missed switch. This is Inside Aero Disasters. And this is how Lufthansa Flight 540 became a deadly milestone in aviation history. November 20th, 1974. Lufthansa Flight 540 is nearing the end of its long journey. The aircraft, a Boeing 747-130, tail number DABYB, had departed Frankfurt the previous evening. After a scheduled stop in Nairobi, it's now preparing for the final leg to Johannesburg. On board, 139 passengers and 18 crew members, families, business travelers. Lufthansa's signature Mickey Mouse children's service operates quietly in the cabin. For most, this is just another routine flight. But inside the cockpit, routine hides a vulnerability. At the controls is Captain Christian Krack, 10,000 flight hours behind him, 1,600 on the 747. Beside him sits First Officer Hans Joachim Schaka, with over 2,000 hours on type. Flight engineer Rudolf Hahn manages the aircraft's complex systems. The Boeing 747 systems are intricate. Unlike modern jets, many functions, like deploying the leading-edge slats, require careful manual preparation before takeoff. The slats are vital. They reshape the wing, allowing the heavy aircraft to generate extra lift at low speeds. Without them, the margin between flying and stalling narrows dangerously. To deploy the slats, the flight engineer must open pneumatic bleed air valves before departure, allowing high-pressure air from the engines to power the slat system. That step was missed. As the crew works through the pre-flight checklist, the pneumatic valves remain closed. The leading-edge slats, invisible from the cockpit, stay retracted. No warning sounds, no alarms trigger. The existing takeoff configuration warning system only monitors the trailing edge flaps, which were correctly set, and with no slat deployment indicators on the main flight display, the flight crew remains unaware of the missing lift. Outside, the early morning sun reflects off the Nairobi tarmac as clearance comes through. Lufthansa 540 cleared for takeoff runway 24. The throttles advance. 4 Pratt & Whitney JT9D engines roar to full power. The giant airframe accelerates down the runway. But hidden beneath the power and motion is an aircraft unknowingly trapped in a critical configuration error, one that will give it only seconds to live once airborne. Lufthansa Flight 540 reaches rotation speed. The control column eases back. The nose lifts, but almost immediately, something feels wrong. Instead of climbing cleanly, the massive jet begins to shudder. A low-frequency vibration rolls through the cabin. Passengers sense it. The pilots feel it in the controls. It's called buffeting, a classic sign of airflow disruption, triggered by the retracted slats. The wings are struggling to generate the lift the 747 needs. The aircraft barely clears the ground. Ground effect, the thin cushion of air close to the runway, temporarily masks the stall, but that cushion is shallow. The landing gear retracts, and with it, any remaining lift margin vanishes. Inside the cockpit, the stall warning light illuminates. The stick shaker activates. The pilots apply full thrust, instinctively pulling to gain altitude. It doesn't work. The nose dips. Airspeed decays. The jet enters an unrecoverable stall, barely seconds after liftoff. 3,700 feet past the end of runway 24, Flight 540 slams into the grassy terrain. The nose gear shears off. The left wing ruptures. Fuel ignites. The fire spreads rapidly. Inside, smoke floods the cabin. Some passengers scramble for exits. Others are trapped by fire, wreckage, and smoke. Emergency slides deploy as survivors flee the burning fuselage. 59 people, 55 passengers and 4 crew lose their lives. The first fatal crash of a Boeing 747 has just occurred. When investigators from Germany, Kenya, and the United States arrive at the crash site, The evidence is clear. The engines were functioning. There was no weather issue, no bird strike, no structural failure. But one fact stands out. The Boeing 747 never truly climbed. Attention turns to the aircraft's high-lift systems, specifically the leading-edge slats. On the 747-130, these slats are pneumatically driven. They depend on high-pressure bleed air tapped from the engines. Without them, the aircraft's wing produces far less lift at low speeds. The margin between safe flight and stall becomes razor-thin. Investigators discovered that the slats never deployed. The reason? The flight engineer failed to open the pneumatic bleed air valves before takeoff. Without bleed air, the slat system remained dormant and invisible to the crew during their takeoff roll. Normally, warning lights on the engineer's panel would show green for deployed, amber for retracted. But both the captain and flight engineer reported seeing green lights that morning. The investigation explores three possibilities: cockpit glare affecting color perception, faulty wiring causing false green indications, or simple human error under pressure. No conclusive evidence proves any single cause. Complicating matters further, the takeoff configuration warning system only monitored trailing edge flaps. It offered no safeguard against incorrect slat positioning. The aircraft was cleared for takeoff with no audible warning, and Lufthansa was aware. 6 months earlier, reports of false green indications had surfaced. Some airlines, like British Airways, had already installed additional warning safeguards. Lufthansa had not. The checklist on the last barrier failed, and with it, so did the aircraft. In the days after the crash, Lufthansa grounds its fleet. Families mourn. The aviation world faces a harsh reality. Even the most advanced aircraft can be brought down by one missed step. Internally, Lufthansa moves quickly. Captain Crack and flight engineer Hahn are dismissed. But without conclusive proof of mechanical failure or willful neglect, both men eventually win legal reinstatement. Hahn later faces criminal charges for negligence, but is acquitted. The deeper problem wasn't isolated to one crew. The Boeing 747's design allowed a single oversight, the unopened slat valve, to disable a critical safety system without triggering any cockpit alarms. 2 prior incidents involving slat misconfiguration had occurred on 747s before Nairobi. In those cases, pilots recognized the problem in time. Flight 540 was less fortunate. The crash forces Boeing to act. The manufacturer redesigns its warning systems, adding direct monitoring for slat deployment. From that point forward, any slat misconfiguration during takeoff would trigger clear cockpit alerts. Other airlines also install independent slat warning lights, additional safeguards that Lufthansa had previously declined. In Nairobi, the wreckage is cleared, but for Lufthansa, Flight 540 remains the deadliest accident in the airline's history, and a permanent reminder of how fragile safety can be when design gaps meet human error. Lufthansa Flight 540 didn't crash because of bad weather or failing engines. It crashed because one system wasn't armed, and no one knew. The unopened slat valve created an invisible trap. One missing step, no alarm, no second chance. It exposed a gap in both human procedure and aircraft design, one that Boeing and the entire industry would move quickly to close. Because in aviation, it's not always what you see that kills you, it's what you miss.